What if the man you thought you could easily dismiss in first class was actually the one who held the absolute power to ground your plane and derail your career in a matter of seconds? The morning air at Miami International Airport, MIA, was heavy with the familiar blend of tropical humidity and aviation exhaust.
We need to review the weight and
a smell
balance
most
before
travelers
we
ignore.
initialize the FMC.
But for Marcus Stone,
Right, I see
it was
the
always a signal
discrepancy
of
here on
global
the chart.
movement, of constant progress. He had accumulated more frequent flyer miles than he cared to track. But this particular journey was planned to be different. No high-stakes negotiations, no major clients, just a scheduled 4-hour window of undisturbed quiet before his next wave of responsibilities. At 45, Marcus didn't project the typical image of a national supply chain company founder. He wasn't clad in expensive silk or wearing flashy jewelry. His attire today was a simple dark gray t-shirt, tailored chinos, and practical, well-worn boots that spoke their own history. He had personally built his enterprise, Apex Transit Solutions, ATS, from the ground up. It was a testament to sleepless nights, conquering every operational hurdle, and successfully managing one complex shipment after another. As he waited near Gate E10, quickly reviewing a few remaining texts, he caught the usual inquisitive glances. It happened often. People typically assumed he was perhaps maintenance staff or a security consultant. No one ever guessed he was the CEO whose company seamlessly managed over 65% of Horizon Sky's fuel allocations and ground logistics coordination across the entire country. But Marcus preferred to operate in the background. He had learned years ago that true influence rarely finds the need to make a loud announcement. The boarding call echoed clearly. Horizon Sky Flight 412 to Chicago. First class and priority boarding now. Marcus stood up, grabbed his carry-on and walked forward. The gate agent scanned his mobile pass. "Good morning, Mr. Stone," he said with a courteous smile. "Seat 3A. Enjoy the trip." He thanked him, stepped onto the jet bridge, and felt the distinct change to cooler, pressurized air. Inside the plane, a handful of passengers were already settling in. The first-class cabin was sparsely filled. A family absorbed in their electronics, an older woman reviewing documents, and a man engrossed in a novel. Marcus placed his laptop bag in the overhead compartment, settled into seat 3A, and let out a deep breath. Finally, no demanding calls, no urgent video conferences, just peace. He looked out the window as the rising sun painted streaks across the runway. Out there, countless planes were lifting off, carrying countless stories, lives, and moments that would never be replicated. He cherished that particular aspect of air travel. A flight attendant, Jenna, passed by, offering a pleasant smile. "May I get you a drink before we take off, sir? Just plain water, please." "Certainly." Marcus leaned back, consciously relaxing his shoulders. His trusted executive assistant, Chloe, had ensured every detail was triple-checked. The crucial pitch meeting in Chicago, the hotel booking, even the name of his local transport driver. He trusted her implicitly. She had been with him since the beginning, back when his office was a folding table in a shared warehouse space. He checked his phone one last time. A message from her blinked at the top. "Chicago is prepped. Take a nap, you've earned a break." He smiled faintly. Maybe he had. But just as he began to truly relax, a presence loomed over his aisle. A man in a pilot's uniform stood there. Tall, sharp features, likely in his early 40s. The immaculate white shirt and gold-striped epaulets conveyed an instant air of authority, the kind that draws immediate attention. He looked down at Marcus with a slight air of disapproval. "I believe you are in my seat," the man stated, his tone firm, certain. Marcus looked up, momentarily puzzled. "Excuse me? Seat 3A. That seat is reserved for me." The entire cabin seemed to subtly tense. The woman with the documents briefly looked up. The flight attendant froze mid-motion. Marcus paused, then checked his phone. "Boarding pass 3A confirmed. Assigned. Paid." "This is my seat," he said calmly, showing the screen to the pilot. The pilot's name tag read R. Cooper. Ryan Cooper, first officer. He stared at the device, then back at Marcus. "There must be an error on the manifest." Marcus's voice stayed even. "There is no error, Mr. Cooper. This is my assigned seat." The air around them immediately grew still and tense. Ryan quickly glanced at the flight attendant, who awkwardly avoided eye contact. But something in the pilot's expression hinted this was not simply about a misplaced seat. The low hum of the final boarding stage hadn't quite ended when the friction in row 3 intensified. Passengers continued to pass by, oblivious that the entire narrative of this flight had begun before the plane left the gate. The flight attendant, Jenna, stepped forward, her polite smile straining. "Is there an issue here?" she asked, her voice light but hesitant. Ryan Cooper shifted his weight, crossing his arms. "There has been an allocation error. 3A is explicitly reserved for crew repositioning." Marcus turned toward her, patient yet resolute. "My boarding pass clearly states 3A. I booked and paid for it 4 weeks ago. If there's an issue, I would like it addressed and fixed before we depart." Jenna looked at the pass, then at the pilot. First Officer Cooper, I don't have a crew note for 3A on my list." Ryan frowned deeply. "Verify it again. It was signed off this morning." Behind them, several first-class passengers exchanged quick, meaningful glances. The woman with the documents discreetly removed one earbud, pretending to check her messages while subtly angling her phone. The man with the novel peeked over the top of the pages. Marcus could feel every eye drifting toward his interaction. Not because he was being loud or hostile, but because he was present, composed, and undeniably confident. "I'm sure it's just a clerical mix-up," Marcus said evenly. "Let's resolve it quickly." Ryan's jaw tightened. "Look, sir, this seat has operational priority. You can move to any available seat in the main cabin temporarily until we get this sorted out." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You are asking me to move to economy class due to a system error that is not my responsibility?" "That is precisely correct," Ryan replied, his tone clipped and firm. Jenna swallowed hard. "Mr. Cooper, maybe we should double-check with the gate before asking a passenger to—" "I said move him to the main cabin for now," Ryan interrupted. The command carried the weight of his rank, but the way he stressed the word him felt dismissive. Marcus inhaled slowly. He was not a man who enjoyed conflict, but his whole career had been defined by walking the fine line between absolute composure and firm self-respect. He'd been in boardrooms where executives mistook him for the catering staff. He'd been ignored in crucial meetings until his data spoke, and the room went silent. But this, being told in a public space that he didn't belong in the luxury seat he had purchased, cut deeper than most offenses. Jenna took a quick step back, glancing between the two men. "Sir, would you mind waiting a moment while I consult with the ground crew?" Marcus nodded once, firmly. "Of course." Ryan exhaled sharply, clearly annoyed by the delay. He turned and muttered something under his breath. Too low for most, but Marcus caught it. Always one of these situations. The words were subtle, but they stung. Marcus sat perfectly still, his fingers resting lightly on his phone screen. He wasn't angry yet, just disappointed. A passenger in seat 4B leaned forward slightly. "Hey man, don't let the uniform bother you. These things happen all the time," he whispered conspiratorially. Marcus turned his head, meeting his eyes. "Do they?" The man immediately blinked, then shrank back into his seat. Jenna returned moments later, tablet in hand. "Mr. Stone, I've confirmed your booking. Seat 3A is definitively yours." Marcus nodded. "Thank you." Ryan's expression didn't shift. "There must be a lingering system fault. I'll take it up with dispatch after departure." But the moment had already been poisoned. The calm of first class had curdled into palpable, awkward silence. Jenna proceeded with preparing the cabin for taxi. Passengers avoided eye contact, and Ryan stood near the entryway just long enough to ensure Marcus understood the issue was not fully settled. But what no one knew, not yet, was that Marcus Stone never engaged in the same argument twice. When he grew quiet, something far more significant was already in motion. The seatbelt sign hadn't illuminated, and the air in first class felt heavy with unsaid tension. Ryan Cooper remained near the galley, speaking in hushed tones to the senior flight lead. Marcus could tell from the sideways glances that the conversation wasn't centered on flight protocols. He maintained his composure, hands neatly folded over his phone, his bag tucked under the seat. Finally, Ryan returned, this time without any pretense of politeness. "Sir," he demanded, "we have verified your booking, but this seat is operationally critical. I need you to relocate now so we can prepare for takeoff." Marcus looked up, his gaze steady. "Operationally critical? You mean for you?" Ryan's jaw twitched. "Yes, it's for crew repositioning, which means your airline's significantly overbooked," Marcus cut in softly. "And that is not my problem." Ryan was clearly surprised by the interruption. His eyebrows lifted, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. "Look, I am not trying to make a scene. Just move to an open seat toward the back, and I will ensure you are heavily compensated." "Compensated," Marcus repeated slowly, allowing the word to linger. "Do you hear yourself speaking?" The pilot let out a sharp sigh through his nose. "Sir, please, I am asking politely. Do not force me to escalate this." Marcus leaned back into his seat, remaining silent for a few seconds. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue further. He simply looked at Ryan, truly looked at him. The power in that gaze wasn't arrogance. It came from years of having to command respect in spaces where it was rarely volunteered. Then quietly, "I paid for this seat, Mr. Cooper. I will remain exactly here." A low murmur spread through the cabin. Phones were discreetly aimed toward the aisle. The woman with the documents was now openly recording. Jenna reappeared, desperately trying to mediate. "Gentlemen, please. We can handle this professionally." Ryan gestured toward Marcus sharply. "Then instruct him to cooperate." Marcus smiled faintly. "I already am." The pilot's thin patience snapped. "Sir, if you continue to refuse my instructions, I will request airport security to remove you." That word security hit the cabin like a visible spark. Several passengers looked up quickly, their expressions hardening. "Security," Marcus repeated. "For occupying the seat I was assigned?" Ryan offered no reply. He simply motioned toward Jenna. "Contact the gate immediately." Jenna froze, her eyes darting between the two men. "Sir, are you absolutely sure about this?" "Do it," he commanded. A deep silence fell over first class. Marcus could hear the faint sound of the open cabin door, ground staff chatting outside, the distant sound of a baggage cart. It was strange how, in this moment, the world felt both small and deafening. He took a slow, deep breath, reached into his pocket, and pulled out his phone. One brief message to Chloe, his assistant, was waiting in drafts. He had typed it jokingly that morning, in case of any ridiculous travel mishaps. The message now reads simply, "Pull Horizon Sky contract." He paused for a heartbeat, not out of anger, but out of focused conviction, and added two more words. "Execute immediately." He hit send. The phone screen instantly went dark. Marcus placed it face down on the armrest and looked up just as a uniformed airport agent, Mr. Jackson, appeared at the door. "Sir," the agent said quietly, "we've been called regarding your seat assignment." Marcus stood up slowly, maintaining his tranquil demeanor. "Of course, let's discuss this outside." As he stepped into the aisle, passengers watched in absolute silence, some empathetic, some merely curious, and some, who always deferred to authority, simply relieved it wasn't their problem. But for Ryan Cooper, that brief walk down the aisle would quickly become the opening chapter of the longest 14 minutes of his professional life. When Marcus stepped onto the jet bridge, the sudden muffling of sound felt like a mental release. No more whispers, no more judging eyes, only the cool, echoing metal of the walkway and the quiet consultation of two ground agents unsure of how to proceed. The lead agent, Mr. Jackson, spoke first. "Mr. Stone, I sincerely apologize for the confusion. Can you explain what happened?" Marcus's tone never wavered. "Your first officer believes I should not be in the seat confirmed on my ticket." Jackson frowned. "You are clearly booked in 3A. I don't understand the issue." "Neither do I," he replied. glancing back through the open cabin door where Ryan still stood stiffly at the bulkhead, arms tightly folded. Jenna, the flight attendant, hovered behind him, her posture tense. "He's claiming it's for crew rotation," she murmured. Jackson shook his head. "There is no crew designation for that seat. None at all." Marcus folded his hands together. "Then perhaps you should inquire why he insisted otherwise." Jackson nodded and moved quickly up the ramp, leaving Marcus to wait by the door. A few passengers peered through the curtain, unable to look away. Ryan's voice carried faintly down the jet bridge. "We have established procedures. Crew repositioning always has priority. And yet," Jackson said firmly, "there's no record of any such request. The passenger seat is confirmed and paid for." Ryan did not reply. He turned back toward the cabin, as if retreating into the plane would somehow make the conflict disappear. When Jackson returned, he sighed. "Mr. Stone, I will personally ensure this is corrected immediately. Would you like to proceed on this flight or take the next one?" Marcus studied his face. He seemed genuine, but the weariness in his eyes suggested he often had to clean up similar messes. "I will stay," he said, "but I will take an open seat in the main cabin." "Sir, you are not obligated to do that." "I know," he said softly. "I choose to." He picked up his bag, walked back through the first-class cabin. Every head turned to watch him pass. The atmosphere in the front had gone heavy, thick with quiet embarrassment. The passenger who told him not to let it bother you wouldn't even lift his gaze. The woman with the recording phone quickly hit stop, as if erasing her own involvement. Ryan pretended to examine his wristwatch. Marcus paused briefly by his seat, looked directly at him, and spoke only 2 words. Calm, measured, and final. "Enjoy it." Then he continued walking down the aisle, past rows of faces trying hard to look busy, past the curtain where the casual noise of coach passengers resumed. He found an empty window seat near the rear, placed his bag beneath the chair, and settled in. For the first time that morning, he smiled, not with joy, but with the quiet understanding that the tables had just completely turned. Some of the most valuable lessons are not taught in corporate settings. They are taught directly in front of people who mistakenly believe you have nothing to offer them. Meanwhile, up front, Ryan Cooper retreated into the cockpit. He adjusted his tie, checking his reflection in the dark glass. The captain beside him, an older man named Captain Rodriguez, glanced over. "Everything okay, Cooper?" "Yeah," Ryan replied curtly. "Just a minor seating mix-up." Rodriguez grunted. "All right, let's get our clearance." But when he radioed ground control, the response was completely unexpected. "Hold position, Horizon Sky 412. Operations has just flagged an internal systems alert. Stand by for update." Rodriguez frowned. "Internal? What does that mean?" The controller's voice was sharp. "System-wide hold. All company systems are locking down. Sit tight." Ryan looked up sharply. "What exactly do you mean, locking down?" Rodriguez shrugged, bewildered. "It means something just completely failed across the board." But exactly 14 minutes later, Ryan Cooper would realize that the man he had forced out of first class wasn't just a random passenger. He was the one person with the authority to freeze every single Horizon Sky flight currently in the air. The cabin lights dimmed as the crew prepared for departure, but the plane remained motionless. The low chatter of the restless passengers began to build. Some were checking the time anxiously, others staring out the window, but nothing moved. The plane stayed parked. Marcus sat quietly in seat 32C in the middle of the economy section. He didn't mind the confined space. Not after everything. The hum of conversation around him was oddly reassuring. No one here knew who he was, and for once he was content with the anonymity. His phone vibrated softly against the tray table. It was a message from Chloe. Actioned. Confirmed. Contract termination filed. He read it once, then again, then locked the screen. He wasn't enraged. That emotion had passed the moment he walked into coach. This was a professional consequence, not a petty revenge plot. His company's systems managed fuel supply logistics, ground service scheduling, maintenance routing, and flight equipment tracking for Horizon Sky. Without his team's network running, their entire operation would immediately grind to a standstill. And it just had. Over the intercom, Jenna's voice broke the growing quiet. Ladies and gentlemen, we are currently experiencing a brief delay due to a system irregularity. We anticipate being underway shortly. Thank you for your patience. A few passengers sighed audibly. Someone muttered about typical tech glitches. Marcus simply closed his eyes. Up front, however, the tension was rapidly peaking. Captain Rodriguez leaned toward the panel, tapping buttons that failed to respond. Navigation uplink is completely dead. We're not receiving any flight plan data. Ryan frowned. That's impossible. These systems are synchronized. Yeah, and they are all suddenly offline, Rodriguez said. Dispatch says every Horizon Sky aircraft is currently holding. They are flying blind network-wide. Ryan stared. Every plane. Rodriguez nodded grimly. Yep, the entire system went dark about 10 minutes ago. Some sort of major logistics blockage. That word hit Ryan with force. Logistics. He immediately remembered the man in 3A. Calm, sharp, confidently silent. Logistics. He could vividly picture Marcus's face again. The quiet finality of his words. Enjoy it. Jenna poked her head into the cockpit. Captain, passengers are getting anxious. Do we have an updated ETA? Rodriguez sighed. Tell them it's a systems issue. We can't move until corporate clears it. Ryan leaned back in his seat, staring blankly at the windshield. His unwavering confidence, the sense of control he always relied upon, began to slip away. Did they specify the cause? He asked quietly. Rodriguez shook his head. They're trying to identify it. Something related to ground coordination. One of their principal logistics providers suddenly halted service. That sentence landed like a punch to the gut. Ryan's stomach lurched violently. Who? Rodriguez squinted at the message coming through on the comms tablet. A company called Apex Transit Solutions. Ryan froze instantly. Rodriguez kept reading, oblivious to his co-pilot's inner turmoil. CEO's name is Marcus Stone. Ryan's mouth went dry. You're joking with me. Nope, Rodriguez said, unaware of the gravity of the name. Apparently, this guy's firm manages all our back-end tracking and ground services. Without them, we can't confirm fuel loads, cargo transfers, nothing. We are absolutely grounded until further notice. Ryan's heart hammered hard, his throat tightening, his pulse accelerating. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on the darkened runway. The palpable silence between him and the captain said everything. Back in 32C, Marcus turned his phone face up again. A final confirmation text from Chloe had arrived. Ground control confirmed. All Horizon Sky flights are paused. He typed back one line, letting it sit there. 14 minutes exactly. Then he looked out the small window beside him. The airport lights twinkled against the night sky. Somewhere up front, he imagined the pilot was finally grasping the cost of casual arrogance. But this wasn't about rage. It was about absolute principle. And Marcus believed in teaching lessons with quiet precision. The kind of lessons that are never forgotten. The passengers didn't know the full crisis, only that the delay was excessive. 20 minutes had passed and the plane hadn't moved an inch. The seat belt sign remained off. The air conditioning ran low, and conversations had shifted from mild curiosity to open frustration. In first class, the entire atmosphere had shifted dramatically. The man with the novel had stopped pretending to read. The woman with the documents kept checking the time, muttering to herself. Ryan Cooper sat rigidly in the cockpit, one leg bouncing uncontrollably under the console. Dispatch says the logistics halt began at 8:42 a.m. Captain Rodriguez muttered, scrolling through the cascading updates. Cargo routing, ground scheduling, maintenance queues, all totally down. No fuel requests are being approved. Nothing at all. Ryan's voice was now barely a whisper. And it started right after boarding. Rodriguez looked over. You're seriously connecting this to that passenger? Ryan gave no verbal answer, but his silence was a clear admission. The captain sighed heavily. Son, people like that don't have this kind of centralized power. Ryan swallowed hard. Maybe you're right, but he knew instinctively that he wasn't. Meanwhile, back in row 32, Marcus checked his watch. It had been precisely 14 minutes since he sent the instruction to Chloe. Around him, people were growing openly impatient. One man called loudly for an explanation. Another groaned about missing a connection in Chicago. Marcus sat quietly, hands resting on his knees. He wasn't smug. He wasn't gloating. He was simply waiting for the inevitable resolution. He thought of the decades it had taken to reach this position. Not just professional success, but inner tranquility. He remembered the faces of the bankers who dismissed his proposals, the long, solitary nights working with a single monitor, and the people who habitually assumed that his calm exterior meant inherent weakness. But calm, he had learned, was simply power under rigorous, precise control. Up front, Jenna's voice cut through the intercom again. Ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate your continued patience. We are waiting on clearance from operations. We will update you as soon as we have any further information. The murmurs grew louder. Rodriguez leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temple. This is completely baffling. They're saying Apex Transit Solutions flagged Horizon Sky's account as non-operational. That can't be correct. Ryan didn't move. Non-operational means completely shut down, he said quietly. It means every system they manage has gone dark. Rodriguez turned toward him sharply. And how do you know that, Evans? Ryan's mouth opened, then closed instantly. He stared straight ahead. Jenna peeked into the cockpit again, her tone cautious. Captain, a gentleman in coach, seat 32C, asked if we'll be leaving soon. He says he has a time-sensitive connection. Rodriguez nodded absently. Tell him we're working on it. But Ryan's head snapped toward her immediately. Did you say 32C? She blinked. Yes. Why? He didn't reply, instead turning his fixed gaze toward the cabin door. His eyes narrowed slightly. Out in the aisle, Marcus looked completely serene. He sipped the small cup of water a flight attendant had brought him earlier. The delay didn't seem to affect him at all. If anything, he looked like a man patiently waiting for a necessary meeting to conclude. Then, suddenly, a chime from the intercom interrupted the murmurs. Attention all Horizon Sky crews. Please maintain current gate position. Do not initiate taxi. Company directive pending. Rodriguez frowned. That's a system-wide broadcast. They never interrupt boarding like that. Ryan exhaled slowly, whispering almost to himself. He did it. Rodriguez turned sharply. What did you say? Ryan looked at the captain, the realization heavy and undeniable in his voice now. That man, the one from 3A, he's not just a passenger. He is the CEO of Apex Transit Solutions. Rodriguez stared in disbelief, a low whistle escaping his lips. Well, he muttered. It seems you just told the wrong man to go sit in the back. Ryan closed his eyes, his pulse pounding in his ears. He could still clearly see Marcus's expression. Calm. Controlled. Not a trace of malice, just that look that clearly stated, you will understand shortly. But the most profound pain wasn't that the plane was grounded. It was knowing exactly who had done the grounding and precisely why. The cabin had fallen into a deep silence. That heavy, awkward kind of quiet where even the air felt charged. Every passenger sensed the seriousness of the situation, even without knowing the details. A baby cried momentarily in the distance. A man coughed twice. The rest was tension you could cut with a knife. Captain Rodriguez finally unbuckled his harness and pushed the cockpit door open. He gestured for Jenna to follow him down the aisle. They stopped a few rows short of economy. Find this Marcus Stone, Rodriguez murmured. If he is who Cooper says he is, we need to speak to him right now. Jenna nodded and quickly made her way toward the back, her shoes clicking softly on the carpet. She found Marcus sitting peacefully, scrolling through his phone. He looked up as she approached. Mr. Stone. Yes, he replied simply. Captain Rodriguez would like to have a private word with you, sir. Marcus gave a polite nod, stood, and followed her back through the cabin. Passengers leaned into the aisle, whispering furiously. No one knew the exact situation, but the man who had been moved from first class was now walking back toward it, escorted by the crew. That was more than enough to spark 100 new rumors. When Marcus reached the cockpit door, Rodriguez stepped aside to let him enter. Ryan sat rigidly in his seat, hands folded, eyes fixed on the floor. "Mr. Stone," Rodriguez began, "I have just received word from our corporate leadership that your company's systems are now offline. I assume this action was intentional." Marcus didn't flinch. "It was a contract compliance measure," he said evenly. "Triggered when your staff violated a professional conduct clause explicitly written into our partnership agreement." Rodriguez's eyes widened. "Triggered? As in automated?" "No," Marcus clarified. "As in immediately executed." Ryan shifted uncomfortably, finally speaking up. "Mr. Stone, look, I genuinely did not know who you were. It wasn't intended to be personal. I believed—" Marcus calmly raised a hand, cutting him off. "You believed I didn't belong in that seat." The silence that followed was punishing. Ryan swallowed hard. "I was following what I understood to be company policy. Crew prioritization." "That is not how you phrased it," Marcus interrupted softly. "You stated there must be a mistake. And then you suggested I should relocate to avoid creating a scene." Ryan looked down, his voice barely audible. "I exercised poor judgment." "Yes," Marcus replied. "You certainly did. And it instantly revealed everything I needed to know about how your company treats people who do not immediately fit their expected standard of belonging." Rodriguez cleared his throat, attempting to ease the tension. "Mr. Stone, with all due respect, the problem is now escalating beyond our immediate control. The entire airline is stalled." Marcus looked at him. "It will resume very soon. Exactly 14 minutes is sufficient time to underscore a principle, but not long enough to destroy the foundation of our working relationship." Rodriguez nodded slowly. "You are sending a very clear message." Marcus's tone remained unchanged. "I am simply reminding your staff that respect is free, but disrespect can carry an enormous financial cost." For the first time since the incident began, Ryan met his eyes. There was no defiance left, no trace of superiority, only guilt and clear realization. "You could have publicly humiliated me," he said quietly. "You could have plastered this all over the news." Marcus offered a faint, gentle smile. "That is not my goal. I do not need to humiliate you to teach you a lesson. I just need you to remember me the next time you assume someone doesn't belong in the place they have rightfully earned the right to be." The cockpit fell silent once more. The captain's radio began to buzz faintly with updates. System stabilization commencing. The delay was nearly over. Marcus turned to leave. As he reached the cockpit door, he paused and looked back at Ryan. "You fly planes for a living. You, better than anyone, should understand this. Altitude does not grant you superiority. It only grants you a wider perspective." He walked back down the aisle, each step deliberate and perfectly composed. Passengers watched him pass, most unaware of the specifics, but sensing the radical shift in power. Something about the way he moved, the quiet, profound authority of a man who had just changed everything without ever raising his voice. Ryan sat there, replaying the words over and over. Altitude does not grant you superiority. He couldn't shake it, but what remained with him even more vividly was the manner in which Marcus had departed. No anger, no gloating, only a calm, unassailable dignity that stripped away every one of his own excuses. By the time Horizon Skyflight 412 finally pulled away from the gate, the sun was high over Miami. The delay, logged officially as a temporary systems fault, had lasted precisely 14 minutes. Nothing more, nothing less. To the average passenger, it was just another frustrating delay. To Ryan Cooper, it was a profound lifetime compressed into a quarter of an hour. He hadn't uttered a word since Marcus left the cockpit. The captain did not press him. Sometimes, silence is the only necessary punishment. He simply followed procedure, waiting for takeoff clearance, meticulously running through his checklist while Ryan sat staring at the controls that suddenly felt burdensome. Down in 32C, Marcus sat quietly, looking out the window as the aircraft began to taxi. The world outside was brilliant and almost blinding. Runways stretched out like silver ribbons across the airfield. He was no longer angry, and in truth, he hadn't been for a while. What he felt instead was a kind of serene acceptance, the kind that comes from knowing you have stood on principle, even without public fanfare. The flight attendant, Jenna, came by with a smile that looked more sincere than before. "Mr. Stone," she said softly, "the captain wanted me to offer you your original seat back." Marcus looked up at her, thoughtful. "That won't be necessary. I'm perfectly comfortable here. Thank you." She nodded, understanding. Then, after a pause, she added, "For what it's worth, I witnessed the whole exchange, and I'm sorry you were treated that way." He offered a small nod. "Thank you. Just remember, how you choose to treat people matters most, especially when you think no one of consequence is watching." She hesitated, then said quietly, "I will definitely remember that." Before moving on, as the powerful engines roared and the plane lifted into the sky, Marcus exhaled slowly. He thought about his grandfather, a foreman who used to tell him, "Son, the day you start believing you are lesser than any other man, you've already lost the battle." That voice, decades old now, still guided him through moments like this. Up front, Ryan finally broke his silence. "Captain," he said, "I made a serious error." Rodriguez kept his eyes focused on the sky ahead. "You did," he said simply. "But you are fortunate, Cooper. You got a chance to see the consequences before it cost you more than just your pride." Ryan nodded. He didn't even raise his voice. "That's what true authority looks like," Rodriguez replied. "It doesn't need to shout. Carries its own weight." They flew in silence for a while. Ryan stared out the window beside him, watching the horizon expand. The same altitude that had once made him feel superior now felt deeply humbling. He thought about every time he had quickly judged someone, the passengers who looked out of place in first class, the crew members he had spoken down to, the people whose intrinsic value he had quickly underestimated. It was strange, he thought, how one quiet man could fundamentally change the way you view the entire sky. Halfway through the flight, Ryan sent a message through the airline's internal system, a formal apology addressed directly to Marcus Stone. It wasn't long or elaborate, just 7 words that contained everything he couldn't verbalize. "I was wrong. I've learned my lesson." He didn't know if Marcus would ever read it, but he sent it anyway. When the plane smoothly touched down in Chicago, passengers clapped out of habit, grateful to finally arrive. Marcus waited until the cabin was clear before standing. As he reached the front, Ryan stepped out of the cockpit, his voice low and sincere. "Mr. Stone," he said, "for what it's worth, I am profoundly sorry." Marcus looked at him for a long moment, then extended his hand firmly. "Do better. That is the only thing I ask of you." Ryan shook it, his gaze lowered. Marcus turned, walked down the jet bridge, and disappeared into the crowd. Just another passenger among many. But the unforgettable story of that flight would not vanish. Within hours, the whispers spread rapidly through Horizon Sky's internal network about what had happened. About the black CEO who had deliberately grounded an entire airline, not out of petty spite, but out of resolute principle. And somewhere in an office full of glowing monitors, Chloe smiled as the systems came back online, precisely on schedule. Because sometimes the most powerful message does not come from screaming. It comes from a deliberate silence that forces the entire world to stop just long enough to truly listen. Respect is never earned by titles, uniforms, or bank accounts. It is earned entirely by how we treat people when we incorrectly assume they have nothing important to offer us. Don't judge anyone by where they happen to be sitting, what they are wearing, or what you assume their role is. You never know the identity of the person you are speaking to, or the incredible power simple kindness holds. If this story moved you, please take a second to reflect, then share it widely. Someone out there might desperately need to hear this powerful reminder.